best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. This is In Your Spoken Word.
Welcome to In Your Spoken Word, Milwaukee Public Television's half hour of poetry and spoken word art. I'm your host, David Kay. Let's get right into it. Our first guest is Miss Dia, Adia Green, and here she is with her piece entitled, Not Bad to Be Just a Poet.
Only circles I keep up with are the rubber bands on my wrist. A long time ago, I caught my own alley-oops to stop looking for my assist. I'm a power forward. It must be my wedding day, the way they give me the blues feel used and borrowed. I write fifths of these poems to drown out the sorrows, but cheers. Here's to these productive tomorrows. They didn't peep the beast because they couldn't hear the snarls. I'm only labeled the angel because my daddy was named Charles, no Barkley. I prefer a chick to bite than stand there and bark at me. I could be put in neutral, but don't ever try to park me. I'm like a Lexus. I got auto features. Some learn by failing, but I had awesome teachers. I'm a success nerd. I ponder till my chest hurt, but my chest works in my favor. It's beat with precision and dripped with jism. Allow me to write my heart's hardest pieces till its own rhythm. A lot of people do and I did them, but they didn't see the progress when I'm still loco. But I'll never turn my back on the city that showed me the power in vocals. I'm prayed up and hopeful. Enforce my poetry like I'm Popo. I love the church folks and the kids, but I'ma spit it for the players and the folks though. Keeping it 100, man. Attitude like there'll never be another Eddie Kane, cause nights like this I wish that raindrops would fall and I could finally go to sleep. Besides, that's the only way to water down the heat. What makes what I do so sweet? Even when I'm on some bull, I still try to teach one, reach one. But people steady reach on for my buttons like a Newport butts and smoke signals, and my fire kindles to my Kindle fire. I got words for hire and verbs retired. I give sliced bread and good men a run for their money. You either run with me or from me, but never think that I'm a dummy. It's been 6 years since a fella tried to shun me, and I don't beg for company or pledge to a company just to feel comfy or no accolades to pump me. Gassing up this hybrid ain't necessary. Give me a publicist and a secretary. I run off my own energy to show no love lost and add to the injury. I'm an entity. I'm in touch with the inner pimp in me. When reading or reciting one, I ignite the sun, even if it's just my own. And I caress these poems. The only way that I throw them is over the head. I'm cold with the lead. This starving artist could never be fed. I'm a stegosaurus in these hater stories. But this ain't Maury, no lie detector. I'm a self-investor and my fam gon' eat. Horseback ride and bare feet. Talent God gave to honor those who paved the way. And I cut bad dealings like them coops did ceilings like a transformer, poet / performer. Optimus Prime in his prime. I'm optimistic and I've even been called exquisite. Not bad to be just a poet.
And we're joined now in the studio by Adia Green. Miss Dia, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure. Now, I want to start, listening to that poem, I'm personally hearing a lot of influence, maybe the beatniks and a lot of the jazz mood. Is that some of the poetry that you found as an inspiration over the years?
Yeah, I'm inspired by the Harlem Renaissance, so all of those poets that fall under that category. As far as the person that actually got me writing was a poet by the name of Jessica Caramore. Oh, yeah. And phenomenal. And so ever since I saw her on Apollo Theater a long time ago, I've been writing ever since.
Oh, that's great. Now, I noticed you were talking about the Harlem Renaissance, and obviously there's been a huge change in the arts over the years. And we were talking a little bit before we started about the fact you don't currently have a poetry book out. You're getting your poetry out to people in different ways. What are those ways that you've been using?
Well, what I'm doing, I do more online things because that's what's thriving right now. But I also have a CD that's been doing really well. And it's kind of just like underground, no, big label things or nothing like that going on, but it's doing pretty good.
Okay, great. And you did specify that it is a CD. I know there's some poets that very much write for the page, for how it looks on the page, and others who very much do for the performance. And clearly, and based on that video, you're very comfortable performing them. Do you think more about the way it will sound or the way the words will flow on the page, or is it some kind of combination of the two?
Well, when you mean like when I write?
Yes.
I kind of go in a zone.
Okay.
And it comes out different every time, depending on why I'm writing, the mood I'm in. I could have a conversation with someone and they'll say a word and I'm gone with the poem. So, yeah, it differs.
Oh yeah, and in that poem, you even made a reference to a Kindle Fire. Have you thought of maybe just doing a book for Kindles and things like that? Because it'd be much cheaper than.
Yes, absolutely. I'm actually writing a book, and I want to incorporate more of autobiography and poetry. So like the poems would head the chapters, and then I would tell the actual story behind the poem. Yeah.
Oh, it reminds me of one of my favorite poets, Jim Carroll, the Basketball Diaries, Book of Nods, things like that. And you know, he started writing very young. I was curious, when did you actually start writing poetry?
When I was 12.
When you were 12?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a pretty good start.
Yeah. I say 12 because that's when I really started sitting down like, I'm going to write a poem.
Okay.
But I've always liked English, and you know, those were the classes that I thrived in back in school. So.
Oh, no, that's great. And there's so many different forms of poetry. Is there a particular type? Do you usually want to rhyme and scan, or do you like free verse, blank verse? Is there any particular type that appeals to you?
I'm so in love with just poetry and the different ways that you can, you know, relay your message. And I vary from the you know, the regular rhyme style, and then like I just did a performance on Tuesday where I didn't rhyme, and that's actually maybe something that I've started doing a little bit more of as of lately, but I don't like to be boxed in and, you know, just do one style.
Yeah, it's more let the words take you where they want to take you.
Exactly.
Oh, that's
more freedom to write.
the absolute best way to do it.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I keep going back to the video, but it was very clear to me that you're meant to be a writer. Just the symbolism of your two earrings, the piece of paper and the pencil. I mean, were those a present? Did you buy them for yourself just to represent you?
Actually made them.
Your mom made them?
Yes. I said, Mom, I want to wear some earrings that represent me as a poet. And she said, okay, well, I'm going to laminate you a piece of paper. I want you to put your signature on it. And she said, and I'm going to make you a pencil earring. And voila.
Is that the kind of thing she does a lot?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
I might have to get the information. My wife is a bit of a jewelry junkie.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm gonna have to steal
and
that
my
from
mom
you
makes beautiful pieces. So,
oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Now, you did say that you do perform live from time to time. What kind of places do you perform around town?
Well, every Tuesday I'm at Nostalgia's. That's on Good Hope and Sherman.
Good Hope and Sherman.
Yeah, and there's a weekly set. It's called Poetry Unplugged. Well, we as poets, we affectionately call it PU. But the host is Kwabena Nixon. And that's really where I got the ball rolling. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I said, hey, this is what I want to do. I worked at the airlines, at a airline here, and one day I just decided that I'm going to pursue my poetry full time. So, yeah.
You're doing the poetry full time now?
Yes.
And how are you going about doing that? I mean, I know that you said you have the CD, and I think you'd mentioned something about a radio show.
Yes, I do have a radio show. It's on Blog Talk Radio.
Okay.
And that's not for profit, but it definitely gets the word out. I have listeners from down south all the way to the West Coast, New York, and they call in. And another thing, I travel a lot. I'm on the off season. I don't like to travel. It's a lot of snow and ice out.
Even down south, you're not safe right now.
Right. Even though I would love to have maybe been stranded in Miami for a couple days, but that's really how I've been really able to generate actually like funds from doing it. People actually fly me to their establishment to do features. I also incorporate poetry into speaking. On Tuesdays in the morning time, I also go to Transition High, and I do a workshop for like teenage girls, and it's called I Am My Sister's Keeper. And so we bring poetry to give kids a different like outlet to express themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So. And you mentioned that radio show, though. How do people go and find your radio show if they do want to hear more of you and more of your work?
Well, they can go to blogtalkradio.com and they just search, it's Miss Dia, MISSDIA, and it's all one word, I don't separate it. I'm on iTunes as well. It's free downloads on iTunes. So they can also search the same way on iTunes.
It's for Miss Dia, all one word?
Yes.
Okay, well that makes it nice and easy for all of
Absolutely.
our viewers today. Now, you had mentioned some of your early influences in poetry. Are there any poets in the modern era here with us now that have really been inspiring you, maybe even people you've gotten to read with?
Absolutely. Oh, it's so many. Definitely Quabinard Nixon. He's, like I said, he's the host at Poetry Unplugged. That's my mentor. He just came out with a book, I Write What I See. And he has definitely influenced me, and, you know, he's guided me in certain ways for me to just basically take it to another level. Shelly Davis, Miss Jazzy, those are some people that I've had the chance to share a stage with. And I'm just in awe every time they, you know, grace the stage. We often do workshops where we all get together as a collective, so that's always a treat. There's some poets that come from Chicago that come to our sets that are national poet Emerald Green. Yeah. She's awesome. We just happen to have the same last name, so I tell everybody that's my sister. But she's a phenomenal. She's been on HBO. She's done a lot of different national shows, so I'm always inspired by her. K Love, she's also a Chicago poet that she does a lot of great things with the children in Chicago. And we all, if you click on the news for 5 seconds, you know those babies, they need that help.
They need all the help they can. But
they do.
We all do, and
Absolutely.
If we're not doing our part to help, then what's the point of even being here?
Exactly.
All right, now I have to ask you the question that every writer hates more than any other one. And I'm going to do the broad version, because the standard question that every writer hates is, of course, where do you get your ideas?
Right.
And I'm sure it's from everywhere, of course. You mentioned even a single word in conversation can send you off. But is there anything in particular that when you feel like you should be writing that can help trigger it for you? Is it music? Is it going to a particular location? Friends, family? What is it that triggers you?
Music, absolutely. I like to go to public places where I can just sit down and maybe people watch. Starbucks, the mall, those are good places. I'm not one of those isolated poets that need, you know, quiet and maybe birds chirping in the background or something like that. A bad habit of mine is getting a good idea, like at a stoplight. I'm looking for a pen and I want to see how fast I can write it down before the light turns green. So, yeah, I'm inspired by almost any and everything. And I never know when it's going to hit me, and I almost hate when I can't just stop what I'm doing to at least write it down, because it's one thing a poet. Oh my goodness.
Well, just, you know, if you get the inspiration at a red light, just please pull over, because we want to be able to have you around so we can at least get the next one. We don't want to lose you too early.
Absolutely.
We've lost too many great poets young.
Absolutely.
All right, so Miss Dia, I really do want to thank you for joining us tonight. We're all out of time for you. Now let's take a look at Ajamu Butler with his piece called Imaginary Bullets.
We used to play cans and play swords with sticks. But now little kids use their fingers as triggers, dodging each other, trying not to get hit by the others. Imaginary bullets, hood monuments are etched in. Teddy bears, balloons, tears, and flowers that will one day disappear. Hood monuments are built on the backs of street light poles. Can't buy proper burial items because too many Black Friday ball-out sessions got the family broke. And now we have to settle for less. And our death is only remembered by that place right there with that monumental mess. Right there is where he took his last breath of air. The balloons there on that monument once reached for the sky, but like Black life, the balloon dies. And instead of it reaching for the sun, it now just lays there on the curbside. Or I guess the balloons can be compared to dreams. For the greatness of God they once reached, but like Black life, they now just lay there in the street. The flowers so beautifully represent earth and life. But as soon as you cut a flower from the ground, it slowly begins to die. And I swore I rolled by a hood monument the other day and seen the teddy bear cry. His eyes was filled with hopeless brokenness. The teddy bear is there because a baby was killed. An infant or a toddler or a teen or a 29-year-old, that still is somebody's baby who was killed. The bear represents the fact that brothers never grew up mentally on the block. They was born in that hood. Their mind didn't grow, they was stuck in that hood. They was shot, their body dropped in that hood. Their mental maturity and inspiration for greatness was stopped in that hood. Little girls used to play double dutch. Now they on the corner with the young blood selling dope trying to make a double up. And it used to be cops and robbers, but now home invasions give cases of robberies. And it used to be penny candies and cartoons. Now ecstasy pills, mollies, goons, and fools. Children can't be children no more. Little girls forced to have sex with Uncle Joe, or mom's cracked out, pop's gone, so the little bros' only hope is to sell dope to get the dough. Shatter spirits and scatter brains. Imaginary bullets get shot from little fingertips. And as a father, it hurts my heart to see this, because I know the depth of Black death down to the very statistic. May God be with them. And I pray that me and mine never become real world victims to these children's imaginary bullets.
And we're joined now in the studio by Ajmu Butler. Ajmu, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about that piece we just heard, Imaginary Bullets. And you were talking a lot about what you called, what was it, the
Hood monuments.
Hood monuments, exactly, with the teddy bear for murdered babies. But then you also mentioned being a father.
Yes.
And now, certainly most people don't assume that about me. I grew up in the hood too.
Okay.
I lost my accent. And I grew up seeing those within a block or two of my house.
Right.
And do you find that things like that have made you need to respond with your poetry more now that you're a father than they did when you were growing up?
Most definitely, most definitely. I think one of the most life-altering, in a beautiful way, life-altering situations that has ever occurred to me was watching the birth of my son. It was also a heartbreaking situation because I knew what he was being born into as a Black man in the streets of America. And in Milwaukee, one of the most poor and impoverished, crime-ridden cities in America.
And segregated.
Exactly. So it then becomes my duty as his father, and not just his father, but as a father to fatherless children. It then becomes my duty to empower them and speak life into them. So Imaginary Bullets is simply a portrait of day-to-day reality, not just in Milwaukee, but across the streets of urban America. You know.
And when is it that you wrote this piece?
Not that long ago. I wrote it for a poetry slam that just came up in December.
Okay.
So I wrote it for that poetry slam.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you were writing it, you were thinking about your son partially, weren't you?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
I don't have any children, but every time I see one of those, I think my wife and I have been talking, and it hits you immediately. And obviously, that's very much real life. What are some other things that you really find help inspire your work?
I think one of the biggest, one of the most potent and one of the most important things that inspires me is my spiritual connection.
Okay.
I don't have a religious preference per se, but I find that allowing God to speak to me and through me, to use my gift of articulation to minister forth a message, I find that that is my deepest inspiration, knowing that when you are on that stage doing poetry, you have the ability to you have all eyes on you, so you have that moment to speak life into somebody. So my inspiration when I write, I get excitement from saying, okay, let me say this and minister to somebody's situation, so that when they hear this poem, they feel so empowered that they just want to stand to their feet and cry. Tears of empowerment, you see what I mean? So that's my inspiration.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you mentioned doing it at poetry slams. So you do a lot of poetry slams, I assume? Not as many as you'd
The one
like.
in December. The one in December was actually my second one.
Wow.
I didn't. There was one in July. I didn't win that one. There was one in December. I didn't win that one as well. But the way I see it, even a poetry slam champ with 100 slams started with 0 slams one day.
Absolutely. Are you using other methods currently to try to reach people? I don't know if we didn't get a chance to talk beforehand, unfortunately. We were running a little behind. But do you have any published books, or are you planning on trying to get some of your works out into a published form?
That's definitely in the works for this year. That's definitely in the works for this season in 2014. I'm a community activist. I do a lot of speaking at high schools and different group homes, St. Charles, different alternative schools throughout the city, speak up at churches, at mosques. And one of the biggest instruments that I do when I speak is poetry. I either lead my session with a poem or I end my session with a poem. So wherever I'm at, if I'm in front of a microphone, poetry is always going to be an essential tool in my arsenal.
Yeah. And you'd mentioned that you do go to schools. Do you find that poetry especially reaches out and helps children come to terms with the world around them?
Definitely, definitely. Especially with me being so young, I'm only 22. So I find that when I do go into different high schools and whatnot, there's a relatability factor that kind of excites and electrifies the audience, especially when I do a poem that is very relatable, or I have poems where I go from A to Z, you know what I mean? I have one where I go from Z to A, you know what I mean? So when I do those extremely creative poems, that always provokes a beautiful response.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Always.
And how old were you when you started writing?
To be honest, I've always just kind of, wrote a lot. I've always been articulate, good communication skills, but I really just started writing last year.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
And you're already doing things like imaginary bullets.
Most definitely.
I'm a little jealous right now. I've been writing for 20 years and I don't have something like that yet. Well, since you are kind of newer then, who are some of the poets that you find inspire you, whether it's people on the current scene or some of the classics? Right.
A lot of the poets in the city just really inspire me on a whole nother level. I definitely could not talk about poetry without mentioning Kwabena, Anton Nixon, as Ms. Dia Ford mentioned. He's one of the pioneer inspirations in my life. Outside of the poetry community, he's an awesome man of God. He's an awesome community activist, and that's just so inspirational to me. But there's a select few of us who kind of go by the term the Nation. Yeah. That's the poetry team I run with, and it's a lot of us. We're all involved in the community, and we inspire each other. So currently, I get my inspiration from the team.
Okay. And so it sounds like you're really becoming part of the Milwaukee poetry community. I know there's a lot of people out there that write, but they kind of do it on their own. They're secluded. What would someone do to get involved with these kind of scenes, to meet the other poets, to find a way to share their work and be inspired by other people?
Well, I say, man, you know what? Poetry is what we write, and spoken word is what we do. You know what I mean? And we just actually had a young lady who's a member of the Nation, the poetry team. One of her friends actually started coming to PU Poetry Unplugged. It was her first time ever, doing poetry. It was phenomenal. We embraced her, and now she's there every Tuesday. So it's just something as simple as coming out and inspiring. And that's, again, what I love about my team right now. Every poem that comes out of our mouth is a testimony. It's a story of empowerment. It's a story of inspiration. So any poet who wants to get on the scene, just come and enjoy the experience.
All right. Now, I heard a rumor that you might have brought another poem with you. Is that true? Do you have another something
Rumors
else?
always have truth.
I was wondering if maybe you'd be so kind as to share that with us then, if you do have something else.
Most definitely.
You can share.
Most
Great.
definitely.
Let's do it right over here then.
Okay. This one is called My Scriptures. I sit in silence and solitude, and I scribe out prayers of salvation for those lost souls that need saving. It's sad because some of y'all so-called saved saints think of the Savior as some spook God superstitious figure. If so, you're super silly. And I'm here to stop that stinking thinking. See, sometime saved folks be more Satan-like than the soldiers on the streets. The way church folks speak as though rainstorms don't touch their status makes me sick. Sometimes religion is child's play compared to soul searching and stirring your spirit. Excuse me, miss, saved and sanctified. Whoever told you your stuff don't stink, lied. Spiritual warfare is serious, see. When you're sanctified, you're set aside strictly for God's specific usage. Y'all are simple-minded sitting here looking at me stupid, so let me simplify this sticky situation. Some people be saying that seeking their line of sight is the only way to be saved from this social suicide. They lied. That's totally not right. God's true temple lies within inside your skin. Spiritual enlightenment starts from within. I'm not going to some spook place because I don't submit to your religion. Somebody say spit, poet, spit. Preachers, stop preaching sermons about spookism and submission to something that does not offer substance. Shut it. The Bible says go over 150 times, but we are stuck sitting in pews shuffling our feet because obesity has us moving sluggishly. Somebody say speak, poet, speak. So what's your storm seem to show up all of a sudden? Stand tall and summon the inner strength you hold. I'm drunk from sipping off the Holy Spirit. I'm super spiritual, so I don't really like humanly sobriety. Society does not define me. Snakes do not scare me. I feel it in the atmosphere that something is shifting. The sun will continue to shine even when life gets ugly. We suffer from our stupidity. Snakes slither and situations get slippery, but seek greatness. Set yourself from the fakeness. Stay free from stress. No man can curse what the good Lord has blessed. Selah, my scriptures.
That was great. Thank you so much, Ajmal, for sharing that with us.
No problem.
And based on the things you've said and also that piece, it really strikes me that even what you had said before, that you aren't a specific religion, you are a spiritual person. Do you find that the fact that you don't find yourself tied down, do you find yourself much more open, helps you with your interactions with people and with your own work?
Yes, it does. It does. I try to live a very eclectic lifestyle. Okay. You can learn something from anything and anybody. I was on a bus stop one day before I had a car, and there was this individual. It was clear he was a drug addict. And one thing he told me, he just sat on the bus stop with me. He told me to never do drugs. And one would look at that and say, well, how can somebody who, smokes crack or heroin tell me not to do drugs? But that was one of the most powerful people who could tell me not to do drugs. And you better believe I took that lesson, So my eclectic nature does definitely add a twist to my poetry.
Oh, absolutely. And so obviously that's a major influence. Are there other parts, is it your life, your family, your friends, other things that have really inspired you from your past that has brought you to where you are as the man you are today and the father you are today?
Definitely. I have a poem actually. Every Wednesday on my Facebook page, I do something called Wordplay Wednesday. We do it every Wednesday morning after a Tuesday night Poetry Unplugged session. And one week we did the topic of sharing your testimony. And so what I did was I just took all of the small random blurts of poetry. I did that Wordplay Wednesday and I put them into one poem. And so in that poem, I talked about when I used to cut myself in high school. I talked about my trials and tribulations as a father. I talked about self-hatred and suicide attempts and everything like that. And then I talked about how I found my purpose. And now I'm on this stage to minister forth real life-altering lessons.
Oh, that's wonderful. Because it's kind of cliche, but I feel like many people, even if they don't identify as a poet, can use poetry and writing to become clear about who they are as a person. It sounds like it's really helped you find who you are.
Oh my God.
It's a clarification you can't really
It's
get
a drug
anywhere
that I
else.
don't want to quit.
It's the drug you shouldn't quit. Absolutely. So many of my favorite poets ended up killing themselves with hard drugs, and it's nice to have someone with as much talent as you that isn't willing to drown himself out that way. Now, we are unfortunately running a little low on time. We just have a few more seconds. But if people want to get more information about you and your poetry, where can they go?
Definitely every Tuesday night, Sherman and Good Hope at Nostalgia. Add me on Facebook, Brother Heal the Hood, God is Good. And that's B-R-O-T-H-A is the first name, H-E-A-L-T-H-E-H-O-O-D is the middle name, G-O-D-I-S-G-O-O-D is the last name. I'm always on there spitting poetry.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ajamu Butler, for joining us. And I'd like to thank all of you at home for joining us and tuning in tonight. I'm your host, David Kay, and I'll see you next time here on In Your Spoken Word.